The mythology of pre-Christian Ireland did not entirely survive the conversion to Christianity. However, much of it was preserved in medieval Irish literature, though it was shorn of its religious meanings. This literature represents the most extensive and best preserved of all the branches of Celtic mythology. Although many of the manuscripts have not survived and much more material was probably never committed to writing, there is enough remaining to enable the identification of distinct, if overlapping, cycles. The Mythological Cycle, the Ulster Cycle, the Fenian Cycle and the Historical Cycle. There are also a number of extant mythological texts that do not fit into any of the cycles. Additionally, there are a large number of recorded folk tales that, while not strictly mythological, feature personages from one or more of these four cycles. Mythological Cycle. The Mythological Cycle, comprising stories of the former gods and origins of the Irish, is the least well-preserved of the four cycles. The most important sources of the metrical Din-Shenchas, a lore of places, and the Lebogabala Erin, a book of invasions. Other manuscripts preserve such mythological tales as the Dream of Aengus, the Wooing of Atin and Cathmaigatured, the Battle of Tuired, one of the best-known of all Irish stories. Oedhid Clan Elia, or the Tragedy of the Children of Elia, is also part of this cycle. Lebogabala Erin is a pseudo-history of Ireland, tracing the ancestry of the Irish back to before Noah. It tells of a series of invasions or takings of Ireland by a succession of peoples, the fifth of whom was the people known as the Tuatha Dé Acute Danann, who were believed to have inhabited the island before the arrival of the Gaels, or Milesians. They faced opposition from their enemies, the Fomorians, led by Balor of the Evil Eye. Balor was eventually slain by Lug Lamfada at the Second Battle of Tuired. With the arrival of the Gaels, the Tuatha Dé Acute Danann retired underground to become the fairy people of later myth and legend. The metrical Din-Shenchas is the great onomastic work of early Ireland, giving the naming legends of significant places in a sequence of poems. It includes a lot of important information on mythological cycle figures and stories, including the Battle of Tailtiu, in which the Tuatha Dé Acute Danann were defeated by the Milesians. It is important to note that, by the Middle Ages, the Tuatha Dé Acute Danann were not viewed so much as gods as the shape-shifting magician population of an earlier Golden Age Ireland. Texts such as Lebogabala Erin and Cathmaigatured present them as kings and heroes of the distant past, complete with death tales. However, there is considerable evidence, both in the texts and from the wider Celtic world, that they were once considered deities, even after they are displaced as the rulers of Ireland. Characters such as Lug, the Morrigan, Aengus and Monanian appear in stories set centuries later, betraying their immortality. A poem in the Book of Leinster lists many of the Tuatha Dé Acute buttons, although enumerates them, he does not worship them. Goibanu, Craidna and Luchta are referred to as Tri-Dé Acute Dana, and the Dagda's name is interpreted in medieval texts as the good god. Nuada is cognate with the British god Nodens. Lug is a reflex of the pan-Celtic deity Lugus, the name of whom may indicate light. Turin may be related to the Gaulish Taranis, Ogma to Ogmios, the Beadi Beta Catabodua. Other important Tuatha Dé Acute Danann figures Boan, Banbar, Brigid, Craidna, Danu, Dianchek, Don, Eritsu, Etin, Fodla, Macha, Nectin, Aes Sidhi, Bean Sidhi. Ulster Cycle. The Ulster Cycle is traditionally set around the 1st century CE, and most of the action takes place in the provinces of Ulster and Connacht. It consists of a group of heroic tales dealing with the lives of Conor mac Nessa, king of Ulster, the great hero Cu Chularan, the son of Lug, and of the friends, lovers, and enemies. These are the Ulaid, or people of the northeastern corner of Ireland, and the action of the stories centers round the royal court at Macha, close to the modern town of Armagh. The Allied had close links with the Irish colony in Scotland, and part of C.U. Chularan's training takes place in the colony. The cycle consists of stories of the births, early lives and training, wooings, battles, feastings, and deaths of the heroes, and reflects a warrior society in which warfare consists mainly of single combats and wealth is measured mainly in cattle. These stories are written mainly in prose. The centerpiece of the Ulster Cycle is the Tain Bo Quailnga. Other important Ulster Cycle tales include the tragic death of Ife's only son, Bricrayu's feast, and the destruction of Dardurga's hostel. The exile of the sons of Usnash, better known as the tragedy of Deirdre, and the source of plays by John Millington Synge, William Butler Yeats, and Vincent Woods, is also part of this cycle. This cycle is, in some respects, close to the mythological cycle. Some of the characters from the latter reappear, and the same sort of shape-shifting magic is much in evidence, side by side with a grim, almost callous realism. While we may suspect a few characters, such as Medb Cur, of once being deities, and Cu Chularan in particular displays superhuman prowess, the characters are mortal and associated with a specific time and place. If the mythological cycle represents a golden age, the Ulster Cycle is Ireland's heroic age. Fenian Cycle. Like the Ulster Cycle, the Fenian Cycle is concerned with the deeds of Irish heroes. The stories of the Fenian Cycle appear to be set around the 3rd century and mainly in the provinces of Leinster and Munster. They differ from the other cycles in the strength of the links with the Irish-speaking community in Scotland, and there are many extant Fenian texts from the country. They also differ from the Ulster Cycle in that the stories are told mainly in verse and that in tone they are nearer to the tradition of romance than the tradition of epic. The stories concern the doings of Finn mac Cumhal and his band of soldiers, the Fianna. The single most important source for the Fenian Cycle is the Acalum na Seigniorage, which is found in 2 15th-century manuscripts, the Book of Lismore and Lord 610, as well as a 17th-century manuscript from Killarney, County Dublin. The text is dated from linguistic evidence to the 12th century. The text records conversations between Cailta mac Ronan and Oisin, the last surviving members of the Fianna, and St. Patrick, and consists of about 8,000 lines. The late dates of the manuscripts may reflect a longer oral tradition for the Fenian stories. The Fianna of the story are divided into the Clan Bascny, led by Finn mac Cumhal, and the Clan Morna, led by his enemy, Gol mac Morna. Gol killed Fiann's father, Cumhal, in battle, and the boy Finn was brought up in secrecy. As a youth, while being trained in the art of poetry, he accidentally burned his thumb while cooking the salmon of knowledge, which allowed him to suck-bite his thumb to receive bursts of stupendous wisdom. He took his place as the leader of his band, and numerous tales are told of their adventures. Two of the greatest of the Irish tales, Toraich di Armada agus Grainna and Oisin in Tir na Nog, form part of the cycle. The Diarmid and Grainna story, which is one of the few Fenian prose tales, is a probable source of Tristan and Iseult. The world of the Fenian Cycle is one in which professional warriors spend the time hunting, fighting, and engaging in adventures in the spirit world. New entrants into the band are expected to be knowledgeable in poetry as well as undergo a number of physical tests or ordeals. There is not any religious element in these tales unless it is one of hero worship. Historical Cycle. It was part of the duty of the medieval Irish bards, or court poets, to record the history of the family and the genealogy of the king they served. This they did in poems that blended the mythological and the historical to a greater or lesser degree. The resulting stories form what has come to be known as the historical cycle, or more correctly cycles, as there are a number of independent groupings. The kings that are included range from the almost entirely mythological Labrador Loingsech, who allegedly became High King of Ireland around 431 BC, to the entirely historical Brian Boru. However, the greatest glory of the historical cycle is the Balla Suibhne, a 12th century tale told in verse and prose. Suibhne, king of Dal na Rada, was cursed by St. Ronan and became a kind of half-man, half-bird, condemned to live out his life in the woods, fleeing from his human companions. The story has captured the imaginations of contemporary Irish poets and has been translated by Trevor Joyce and Seamus Heaney. Other tales. Adventures. The Adventures, or Ectre, are a group of stories of visits to the Irish otherworld. The most famous, Oisin in Tir na Nog, belongs to the Fenian Cycle, but several freestanding adventures survive, including the Adventure of Conley, the Voyage of Bran Macferbail, and the Adventure of Loager. Voyages. The Voyages, or Imrama, are tales of sea journeys and the wonders seen on them that may have resulted from the combination of the experiences of fishermen combined and the otherworld elements that inform the adventures. Of the 7 Imrama mentioned in the manuscripts, only 3 have survived: the Voyage of Maelduin, the Voyage of the Uichara, and the Voyage of Snegus and Macregla. The Voyage of Maelduin is the forerunner of the later Voyage of St. Brendan. Folk tales. During the first few years of the 20th century, Hermione T. Kavanagh wrote down many Irish folk tales which she published in magazines and in 2 books. 26 years after her death, the tales from her 2 books, Darby O'Gill and the Good People, and Ashes of Old Wishes, were made into the film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Noted Irish playwright Lady Gregory also collected folk stories to preserve Irish history. Eddie Lenihan, first author of Meeting the Other Crowd as well as writer of numerous other books, has a growing reputation as a modern Irish folklorist.